What is the ceiling and floor for Texas A&M quarterback Conner Weigman this season?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So happy Friday, everybody. The weekend is here. It's very exciting. And I'm moving into a new house actually today. I'm recording this Thursday. I'm moving into a new house, which is exciting and a better house this year. So I'm looking forward to that. But I want to talk today about the ceiling and the floor for Conner Weigman because, I don't think there's a super wide gap. I think the ceiling, you know what I mean? Like, I think the ceiling's here and the floor's here. I don't see a world where Conner Weigman has a terrible, awful, horrible season to where here's the floor and here's the ceiling. There's a huge gap between them. I don't see it like that. I see it as the ceiling for Conner Weigman is he's a top 10 quarterback in college football. And that's the ceiling. I think, top 3 quarterback in the SEC, top 10 quarterback in college football. I think that is his ceiling. I think his floor is a top 30 quarterback in college football. I just don't. Here's the deal. With Coach Klein, who now after talking to DeAndre Ryden, Texas A&M running back commit, after hearing quotes from Coach Elko yesterday, from the players yesterday or 2 days ago, I now am fully a believer that this offense will not fail. I'm a believer that definitely a believer that I'd put it like this. I don't see a world where Texas A&M's offense doesn't take a leap from last season. And obviously last season you had a lot of moving parts. You had 4 different quarterbacks at times and weapons in and out of the lineup, and there was a lot different going on there. Who was the OC, really? We don't really know. There was a lot going on last year. But you heard Conner Weigman say it himself. The offense this season, how would he describe it? How would you break it down? Points, a lot of points. We talked about that quote yesterday. I think they're going to score a lot of points this year. I'm a full-on bought-in believer on that this season. And I look at this. I look at the season Conner Weigman is capable of having, and I think he's going to be really, really dominant. The floor, I think he's too talented, and the weapons are too good for the floor for Conner Weigman to be off. The 13th best quarterback in the SEC. I just don't see it happening. I don't, and I don't even think that's overhyping Conner Weigman. I think that's I know the talent he possesses. I can see the talent he has. We know how good of a quarterback Conner Weigman is. So I think it's a good thing to say that the ceiling and the floor aren't super widespread. And it's funny because last season when we were breaking down the ceiling and the floor of like the team, it was like, man, the ceiling is 10, 11 wins and the floor is 5. It's like the ceiling and the floor is the ceiling's on the top of the Eiffel Tower and the floor is on the ground. I mean, like that was the difference. But I don't see it being like that, ironically, for Texas A&M this season and for Conner Weigman this season. I think Texas A&M's quarterback is in the perfect position. He's got everything he needs to succeed. I think he's got great weapons. We talked about yesterday about, okay, Jabri Barber might miss a game, maybe 2, but he's going to be out there for a good portion of the season. You've got your other great receivers. You have got your great elite tight ends, your running back room. The offensive line is going to be a question there, but still, when it comes to the weapons, they're going to be great. The weapons for Conner Weigman are going to absolutely be incredible. So the issue then becomes, what can he be? What can Conner Weigman be himself? Is he going to hit this ceiling that myself and I think many of you every day here at Locked On Aggies believe he can be? I mean, the people I trust more than anybody in the world when having a conversation about football or NFL scouts, I think that they're the best of the best. I think that they are the ball knowers of ball knowers. They know what it takes to translate. They know what type of quarterback they need to be successful, their team to be successful in the NFL. And many NFL scouts believe and GMs believe that player to be Conner Weigman. They believe he's going to be a great player that's going to be drafted high in the NFL draft and a guy who could be a really good player for a team in the NFL at some point. So, which also, I'm just saying this right now. I cannot wait to draft Conner Weigman on a fantasy football team. That is going to be so awesome. I'm just very excited for that. I just wanted to let everyone know that. I always love drafting Texas A&M players. Ironically, I have a lot of stock in Raheem Mostert this year. So we're rooting on both A-Chain and Mostert being great. Love them both. We need them both to be great. But all kidding aside, can't wait to draft. Can't wait to draft those players. Conner Weigman, Noah Thomas, whoever it is. But moving on. I think that this conversation should be one that excites Texas A&M fans, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the point across right of what I'm trying to kind of push here, which is I think if Conner Weigman's worst case scenario hits, he still has a good to really good season. I don't think Conner Weigman's going to have a season where you just go, oh man, he was awful this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's too talented. His weapons are too good. That's just the reality. I think the only thing, and I don't want to get super deep into this conversation because we're getting ready to talk about this a little bit, but would be if the offensive line crash and burns. That'd be the only thing in my mind that would lead to people not to Conner Weigman not having the season that I believe he's going to have. That'd be the only thing that makes his floor drop below what I believe it's going to be. But for the most part, I think you're going to see Conner Weigman take that step. And it's funny because we keep talking about this. I love people come up to me and they ask me about Conner Weigman. They ask me about Texas A&M. And I always say, no one in college football is talking enough about Conner Weigman. He's going to have a really, really good season. I am fully a believer in that. I believe he is an incredible player. I believe that he is going to have a monstrous season. And I'll tell you, I believe after this season, you're going to see Conner Weigman move on to the NFL. And I think Coach Colin Klein is going to play a huge role in this. And it's funny. I think that Colin Klein is going to be the reason. I think that Conner Weigman is going to be what turns Colin Klein into a head football coach. I think people are going to go, man, Weigman was a great player, but you really got him to that next level. You got him drafted 23rd in the NFL draft. Come be our head coach. I think he's going to be that piece for Colin Klein. So I think Colin Klein, knowing that, is going to work his behind off to make sure that their chemistry is great and he ends up having this season that we all believe he can and will have. So those are my thoughts on the ceiling and floor of Texas A&M quarterback Conner Weigman. If you are a believer that the floor should be a little bit of a wider gap than I am, let me know in the YouTube comments. I'm really curious to hear y'all's thoughts. If you think it's it's kind of a smaller gap like I do, let me know. If you think it's a wider gap, let me know. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts on this conversation. So leave that in the YouTube comments. I want to talk a little bit about if it all went wrong if it all went wrong, what is the worst case scenario for Texas A&M this season, and what would it take for that to happen? We're going to have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and leveled up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So, I want to have this conversation about if the worst case scenario, and I am talking the worst case scenario, happens, what is that for this Texas A&M football team? That is going to be the conversation we're going to have real quick. And, it's funny, just like I talked about the ceiling and the floor for Conner Weigman, I believe that, not being super wide, I kind of believe that the same thing is here with the actual team as a whole. I believe that there is a narrow gap for the ceiling and the floor of this team. I think that the high ceiling for this team is 10 wins. I think that the floor is 8, but we're going to say 7 to just keep it realistic. So 7 to 10. There's a lot of teams that have like 6 to 10 or 5 to 9, wider gaps. I realistically think Texas A&M's gap is 8 to 10, is somewhere between 8 and 10 wins. Now, for the Aggies to go 6-6 or 5-7 or something just absolutely abysmal, there's a lot of things it would take. The first thing it would take, and it was something we hinted at a minute ago, and it's something that you all that are everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know that I am a huge believer in, and it is the offensive line being very, very, very bad. That is one thing where we keep saying ceiling and the floor. You want to talk about somewhere where there is a wide gap between the ceiling and the floor? That is the offensive line. They're either going to be good or awful. And they could fall somewhere in the middle, but I'm saying the ceiling is good and the floor is awful. And that's not a great spot to be in. I wish the floor was they're going to be elite. The ceiling is they're going to be elite, and the floor is like, they'll be okay. But no, I think the ceiling is they'll be pretty good, or the floor is they'll be awful. And they'll fall somewhere in that area. So, offensive line is a position that there's so much importance. There's so much importance at the offensive line position. You have to be able to put out an offensive line that can compete, because listen, your offense will not function as well as it could have if your offensive line is terrible. Now, yes, if the offensive line isn't good, Coach Klein, I'm sure, can find a way to, get the ball quickly out of Weigman's hand, whatever. He'll find a way to make it work with the bad offensive line. But you'd rather just not have a bad offensive line. How about that? How about let's just not have a bad offensive line? But to me, that's the number one thing. If the offensive line play is bad, that is where some winnable football games could quickly turn into losses due to one thing. The other position would be secondary. We keep talking about, and I keep telling y'all how much of a believer I am that this secondary is going to be a lot better than what we saw last season. I mean, the secondary single-handedly lost a few games last year. Definitely Miami. You could say Alabama. I mean, there were a few games last year where if the secondary doesn't give up those long bomb touchdowns, the Aggies might win these games. And I think that this secondary has got to be all around better. They have to be better. And I think they're going to be better. I mean, once again, Bryce Anderson talked about this yesterday. He said, listen, like Coach Elko went and got some dudes in the portal. This isn't going to be a problem anymore for us. And I believe him. I do believe him. The offensive line, I am concerned. The secondary, I believe they're going to be great. So there's a difference there. But I think the secondary, because I feel really good about the front seven. I do. I feel great about the front seven. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, if the front seven's not good, because I think they're going to be really good. I don't have much concern there about the offensive line not panning out. So that then brings the point, where could this go wrong? And I think aside from secondary and offensive line, I mean, once again, I think we feel great about the front seven. We feel great about quarterback. We feel great about running back. We feel great about tight end. I would say we feel pretty good to great about receiver. I think that'd be another place where I go, okay, one other thing that could happen is the wide receiver room doesn't end up taking this leap that I believe it will, or this wide receiver room ends up not being quite as good as it should be. I just, that's what would create a problem, but I don't think it's a problem. And I think now, knowing that you're going to have Jabri Barber out there, maybe, the second or third game of the season, is massive. It's so huge, because I think he's going to be a great player. He was really turning heads before that injury and before the surgery. So I do think that I don't see Texas A&M going 6-6. And once again, you've got to remember that this has to do with the schedule. This is a schedule-based argument. And I've said this time and time again, and I'll say it once more. If Texas A&M was playing Ole Miss and Alabama and Georgia instead of South Carolina and Mississippi State and Arkansas, this conversation would be very different. It would be, how can Texas A&M get themselves bowl eligible? That would be our conversation. But that's not what's going on here. You're playing a manageable schedule to where I just don't see Texas A&M not winning 7 football games. I believe that is the worst case scenario, is 7 wins. I do. And I think it's the worst case scenario. And I think in that you'd have to lose your swing games. You'd have to lose all those difficult home games. I just don't see that happening. So that is the worst case scenario for me, is 7 wins. And I think that for it to get any worse than that, you'd have to have some serious problems at places that we don't foresee there being serious problems. So we'll kind of have to see what happens there. But I mean, let me know in the YouTube comments. Well, I want to hear y'all's thoughts on the ceiling and floor for Weigman. And then I also want to hear y'all's thoughts on what is worst case scenario for this football team. I mean, and I'm talking worst case scenario. And what would be, if y'all had to guess, what would be the reason that the Aggies landed on their worst case scenario? Let me know in the YouTube comments y'all's thoughts on those topics. I've got some mailbag questions. Who's going to win the center battle? How much of an impact and what kind of impact will Nick Scorton make? We're going to talk about those 2 questions coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. So I want to start with this conversation about Nick Scourton, because we talked about how good he's going to be and how many sacks I believe he can have. But I think what's more interesting than all of that is the impact he can have. So I think you've got to kind of look at it like this: the impact that Nick Scourton can have. I think that he is a player that there will be so much planning and game planning that goes into slowing Nick Scourton that it can open up windows for other guys. The Shamar, some of these other elite defensive linemen. It will give them opportunities to go get after the quarterback. And that is why I think Nick Scourton's so incredible. Now, here's the deal. If he's as good of a pass rusher as I believe he is, and he's going to be as good of a pro as I believe he can be, he's going to have to learn to beat some double teams. Aaron Donald, DJ, and JJ Watt, they're getting double teamed all the time. And that's good, because that means other players have opportunities to make plays. But the best of the best have to be able to beat double teams sometimes. So we're going to need to see Nick Scourton be able to beat the double team. And if he proves he can beat the double team, if he's getting double teamed every once in a while, he wins the double team, and that gives other players opportunities to get after the quarterback, watch out. I'm just telling you that, watch out, because that's going to make an elite defensive line even better. And that is really, really, really exciting. Last question before we call it a day here, or call it a week here at Locked On Aggies, is who wins the battle at center? So we talked about yesterday, Coach Oko said it's between Dewberry, Mark Naboo, and then the Utah transfer Fui. And I believe, man, this is such tough. It's so tough, but I think Texas A&M's best offensive line, I think the best possible offensive line for this football team during the 2024 football season has Colley at center and Mark Naboo playing one of the guard spots with Chase Basantis. And then you got Trey Zune, and then your other tackle will be really interesting. Obviously, I believe there's some guys fighting there, whoever ends up winning that job. But, I mean, you got a couple guys that can play there. So that then becomes, I think right tackle then becomes really the only battle on the offensive line, because you got Zune, you've got Basantis pretty much locked in. So then it's who plays one of the guard spots and who plays center. And I think your best possible lineup has Colley at center. He's a guy who started a lot of games last year at Utah. He's played a lot of college football. He has a lot of experience. I think he's a guy that can come into the SEC and be really, really, really good. The other, once again, and that then puts Mark Naboo at one of the guard spots, and I think that he is a great offensive lineman. I think either Colley or Mark Naboo wins it, I'll tell you that. And I think one of the others plays one of the guard spots. So that's my take on the offensive line. But listen, once again, Coach Oko said they're going to rotate some players in and out. I mean, we're going to see all of these guys in this battle playing some legitimate snaps for the Aggies at offensive line this season, according to Coach Elko. So everybody's going to get their opportunities to prove they deserve to be out there on the field. But the good news to me is you have lots of different combinations at offensive line that you can use. And I think all of those different combinations possess a different type of upside for this Texas A&M football team. So I like that while the offensive line's a concern, and once again, it's going to be a concern until we see it not be a concern on the field. And that is true. But at the end of the day, this offensive line has a lot of different options with a lot of players that have some high upside. So I do believe that this coaching staff will find a way to put the best combination out there that makes this offensive line the best it can possibly be and get the most out of all of the talent you have on this roster. That is going to do it for this week here at Locked On Aggies. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. It was a great week on the show. Had a lot of fun. Once again, we are now at 1,991, I believe, subscribers. Might gain a couple more before tomorrow's show. But if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We're getting so close to 2,000. Keep hitting that button. It really helps. I appreciate y'all a ton. Hope everybody has an outstanding weekend, and we will see y'all on Monday right here on Locked On Aggies.